Hey, Dror, how are you?
Good morning. I'm still waking up-ish. It's early and it's school holidays.
What do you mean it's early? Like we're shooting it like an hour later and it's daylight savings. You may notice I'm wearing my Buzzy t-shirt today. I was getting ready this morning and I was thinking, what am I excited about? And Adam, who's the founder of Buzzy, showed me some of what they're doing, and I thought it's appropriate to wear the Buzzy shirt. As you're involved more as well with Buzzy, um, well, I'd love for you to share what's going on with Buzzy, because I think what they're doing is pretty amazing. In sort of no code space, we've talked a lot about how application, the whole process of how we're going to develop applications, whether it be a co-pilot, but what they're doing with no code and being able to generate applications, I think is pretty amazing. And what they're about to release as well is something pretty significant.
Spilling some beans? Should we spill the beans?
Well, you're on the board, so you should know more than I do.
In terms of beans spilling, I think it's gonna look. It's a very cool concept. So we talked a lot about AI. Prompt to app. When you say, "Hey, who wants to talk about prompt to app?" You get a group of people that think you will literally just say to the AI, "Here's what I want," and it will come out the other end the way you want it. And I think that's a little bit pipe dreaming at this stage. Maybe show me some futuristic unknown technology in a few years, sure. But in realistically, you never really move from a single prompt to define an app. You have to move to in cycles. Like you have to prompt something, get something, okay, and then start improving, iterate on that. Inevitably, you will have to tweak it for you. Move my icon 3 pixels to the left is not something you want to tell the AI. Move my icon 3 pixels to the left, make it a little bit greener, add some shadow. That's something that you want to use Figma for. So Buzzy early on moved this. The flow was that you have a prompt, app, and then into Figma as the authoring environment for the UI. And that's a really revolutionary idea. What if you start from the Figma and you already have the design, and then you want to annotate it? Then you want to make that an app. How does that work? So what Buzzy did is basically a tool that allows you that can use AI to scan the entire Figma file and basically using Gen AI understand how to build an app out of that. It's a very powerful paradigm. What they've recently released or are in the process of building, and we saw some preview demo, and I think it's very cool. What they are working on right now, and it's currently in beta, and we had a chance to look, and you looked at it, so you tell me how it works. But the idea is, when you translate an prompt to an app, behind the scene, there's basically you're looking for templates, you're trying to use generative AI to build a data model and so forth. And they've just made that process maybe 10 times better. So there's a better chance, there's a higher likelihood that when you try your first prompt to get the app you want, you will get a close enough app to what you want. All right, that's kind of step number one. Step number two, if you start from a Figma design of an app, they made it 10 times faster now to create the actual app from that design. All right, so they call it Flexi Build, which is the first feature, and auto annotate. So what did you see that made you excited?
Yeah, look, I tell you why I'm excited. It's more what it opens up for people who have certain skills or not skills to be able to create. And already the few people that I've shown have been like, oh, hold on. And in fact, we have an investor who I'm talking to right now, and they went and signed up. They went and built their own applications. They said while they were having a cup of coffee, and that was their trial to see how, what this was like. And I think this is going to open up a lot more options for people. I think the other thing is it allows designers. So designers, if you think about what's happening with generative AI and designers, their market, there's a perception that they're going to be out of a job. Now, I don't think they'll be out of a job, but I do think what they could maybe charge a lot more for before is going to be different. It's going to be different just because people can generate certain things at a pretty high level now without having to go to designers. So what I think a tool like Buzzy does as well is allows designers to step up the food chain as well to one design and then build and adjust, and using a tool like Figma gives them a new avenue of business. So I think with all of the AI tools and changes and products that are coming out, businesses need to adapt to what is their business, and that business might change slightly. So I think that's what I like. That's what I think some of these features that are coming out in there are are going to achieve. That it's going to give people new options, new business opportunities if you start using products like this. And this is, I mean, look, just an example of where we're sort of seeing that, and that's across every industry. So last week, OpenAI had they sort of completed that big round of funding, their multi-billion-dollar round that they had. Did you know there was something interesting in there that I thought that we didn't really touch on last week about the fact that OpenAI requested their investors to refrain from investing in some of their competitors, and so they talked about the funding to exclude rivals like Anthropic and XAI and you know some of the that new the new sort of super intelligence company SSI, or often related to ex people that were a part of OpenAI. What's your take on what they're doing there in terms of requesting that people don't invest in their competitors?
I think it's fair game. I think it's fair. Look, if you like, it's the golden rule, right? If you have the gold, you make the rules. So if you're OpenAI and you can make if everybody wants to invest in you, you can make a rule that you can't invest in my competitor. Also, the idea of like, this mega tech titans that have infinite amount of money that can invest in everyone at the same time. How is that fair for the actual startup? So this is not to discourage small time investors to put 5 million there and then 5 million on their competitor. This is basically to discourage someone like Amazon and Google then to play them against each other. That's not good for, like, from a perspective of my OpenAI competitive advantage. You're throwing so much money into, if you're the fiduciary of OpenAI and your job is to, I don't know how much money they raise now. What is it, like 20, 34? I keep counting. It's like the tens of billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So if there's so much money behind it and you're the fiduciary of that amount of money, and what's your biggest competition? Is that the other guys who put money in put money to the competition. What's the most important thing that you need to worry about? Like, that money is lost. So what's the one thing you need to do is to outcompete the other guys. And if you're a desirable investment, you can make that rule. I would make that rule. Fair game.
Well, it's not legally binding, room, but if your product's that good, then you shouldn't need to do that. And to me, it also shows, maybe some of the competitors who are less funded have some pretty good products, and they're worried about that.
I think it's I agree with that. But it also gives you a signal that the game here, the competitive advantage, is literally amount of money. Like, if the competitive advantage was algorithmic or market network or any particular set of customers and a moat, then it would be less important to deny resources from your competitor. But if the main competitive advantage is the quality of, that's kind of my belief, my deeply held belief, is that the smarter model will win, because the switching costs of APIs these days is really low. Re-instrumenting your app between using OpenAI and using Claude, that is literally something like an engineer can do in a day. Uh, Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like, it's that order of magnitude. So then why would you ever switch to another AI? Because it's smarter. So if the winner will be the smartest, and the path to smartness is money because of training. That's the current architecture. I think the current architecture we have in the market is that money wins, and that's, I think, as a result, this is how people behave. What do you think?
No, no, I disagree. I don't think the smartest one will win, because I think people are inherently lazy, and so once people start using something, they stick with it, or they stick with the brand. And you look at, like, Apple releasing some things now, they won't have the best performing
But
models.
wait. I'm not talking about the consumer changing from, www.chatgpt to www.cloud. I'm talking about the APIs that power devices and services that we switch. So you will still use Apple. Apple will move to use, Claude or OpenAI, whatever, or Microsoft. Like, if Apple come up with their own model and that's super smart, and Microsoft has a smarter model, so Microsoft will switch to OpenAI. I mean,
Look, I think there's a tipping point. So the tipping point is, how much better does it have to be before you switch? Because otherwise you're constantly switching. So there's a cost of switching. I think when that incremental difference is more than the cost of switching, people will do that. But otherwise, you'd be constantly going back and forth. And so, uh, look, I think it will be. It's such a fast moving space that I think people will still have that laziness to switch. I think the opportunity could be to have something that will switch automatically based on price and performance. And if you could have something that, maybe the future is you have something which is independent of that, and finding that best best performance and cost at whatever that point in time is. But because they could be all very similar. So if it is and it's negligible in terms of one better than the other, it'll then come down to what you pay and what you get. Look, I thought it was interesting just just that round of funding is going to be interesting to see what happens with all the other competitors. I know there's talk of now Anthropic, which is one of our investments as well, that their valuations now up to 40 billion plus that they'll be raised at that amount. So it's just interesting to see where we're going to go with this and what's going to be the case in a few years' time. I think will be really just yeah, it'll just be interesting to see who's still there and what companies are really still going to be at that forefront, and the differences between them all, and whether they're open or closed. What'll win. So, cool. Is there anything you wanted to talk about, Draw? I know I
Want to talk about the long weekend and the having kids and running around? Different Oh, it's a different podcast.
Yeah, different podcasts. Yeah.
What did I notice? I noticed that they came up with Canvas. OpenAI came up with Canvas, which I really like. So early on, as someone who, you talked about Buzzy, if you go check Buzzy website and you check the video we have there, you would notice that it depicts a type of interface where you chat on the one side, and the thing is being built in the middle. Early on, when people started thinking, okay, how is this? So language is a user interface. Remember, we talked about language is basically another way to get the computer to do what you want, right? We used to have like commands. Then we used to have like drag, mouse, like point and click devices, touch devices. Those are ways to run commands, touch, click. So those are the interfaces to get the computer. Now you can use language too. The problem with language is that, sometimes moving the mouse and clicking is weaker than like telling the computer what to do. Hey, I need you to please move that a little bit to the left. Oh, no, I mean, sorry, to the right. You know what I mean? Like, you think about actually instructing the computer to do all the stuff you want to do. Or think about like writing a long article and like dictating it as opposed to typing it. Sometimes just let me type it. So the question becomes, how does this type of UI become like, so over the years, the UI of buttons and toolbars and menus became something we all got used to. I remember the days it was the new thing. Maybe I'm a bit old, but not that old. But, the idea that every interface now has a toolbar and menus and buttons, etc. So Chrome or the operating system itself, or virtually every tool you open. Now, how do you add language to it? What does that mean? So language to search is easy. So, a search bar, or you type and you chat. Okay, great. What about software? So that's kind of chatbots, etc. Or like Meta put it into their, WhatsApp or messages or etc. How do you, in all sorts of software like word processing, code, or, let's face it, code is going to be the king at the beginning, coding. When you build something, it's called artifact. How do you use language? Because the problem is that if you just copy things in and out of a chat box, it doesn't have the context of what you're trying to do. So people are saying, in other words, chatbot is not the prime interface. Okay, it's the first the first kind of wave of software came was kind of chatbots themselves, but that's not the end game. The end game. So OpenAI is releasing Canvas, and Canvas is a way for you to have like an interface somewhere, like a thing you're writing or the thing you're working on the one part of the screen, and a chat about it in the other part of the screen. And they're not the first one. So Claude came up with theirs. We talked about, we looked at it. That was pretty cool. And I think that's and Buzzy thought about it 2 years ago. We kind of played with that idea, how to make it work. But I think that's kind of the direction things are happening. So if you ask yourself, is this a really big game changer? How big of a game changer this really is? When you start seeing, AI, they said software is eating the world, AI is eating software, right? So if you start thinking about like how every software interface we working on will have, AI baked into it, the chat on the right, on the side, the right, on the left, when you talk about the thing you're doing, that's the main interface of language for artifact editing and generating software. That's my take. What's your?
Yeah, look, I would add there's one that I have been using that I go, oh, holy crap, this is really useful, and that's Google's Notebook LM. You mentioned it briefly. I've now been using that a lot more in earnest, and I would really recommend anyone out there to go and try Notebook LM. For me, what that does is I can paste whatever those things are. It might be a video, and in fact, I put one of our videos into Notebook LM.
So you made a podcast of our podcast?
Yeah, kind of.
I like it.
I uploaded one of our videos. We have a video about why AI, why investing in AI. Gave it the video, and a minute or two later, it generated a wave file of a podcast talking about our discussion drawer, and I was like blown away. It's pretty cool.
All right, so AI, everyone's talking about it, right? And for good reason. I mean, it's not just the cool technology, it's the potential, right?
Mhm.
Is it too late to get in on the action? That's what we're diving into today.
Oh, it's definitely not too late. There's this YouTube video we found from Empress Capital. They're a venture capital firm, and they specialize in AI. And they break this whole why now of the AI boon into 3 key factors, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh, so we're getting insights straight from the people on the ground, the ones actually investing in AI.
Exactly.
And it's talking about you and going, hey, you started this. There's about one of the guys in the fund. He created this business, AI business, Smart Sparrow, got blah blah, and they're going, this is pretty cool. It's kind of funny, but this week as well, I received the same thing about a portfolio company. They sent me a discussion around a new brand that they were releasing within there. And so I think using something like Notebook LM is really powerful. I really recommend everyone goes and tries it. But also for founders out there, I would put your own deck or your own video into it and see what it says about you, see what the discussion is. It's pretty cool. And I think as a research tool or as a way to get a perspective on your own work, I think it's really great. Straight out of it. The interface of the way it does it, though, is really great. So create me briefing notes, create me this, create me that. And I found that so useful for research on any topic that even for doing a lot of what we're doing now, I'm going to switch to doing that. Whereas before I would use OpenAI or Claude but the interface, you're right, is the key thing, that the quicker you can get what you want out of it, the better. And so I've been super impressed by that, and the multimodal ability to take video, text, documents, whatever, create a whole, a whole range of information around that, and then use it different ways is really powerful. I think the challenge when we think about it from an investment point of view is if you can use this off the baseline out of any of the models, whether it be ChatGPT, Claude, or this Notebook LM, what is going to take people out of those and use applications? We need to make sure. I think you're in this sort of general phase. How do you're going to have applications that provide a lot more value in what they're doing. So just adding these features are not going to be enough in what we're seeing. So
my mental model for this is to look for the kill zone, around the core functionality of the giant. So if you're looking at a useful way to look at it is to see, okay, what did Apple and Google do with their mobile ecosystems, right? So clearly Apple released iPhone, and there's a certain categories of apps that are Apple that bake into their that are baked into the Apple ecosystem, that are owned by Apple, and there's very little you can do to compete, right? If you have a Notes app, maybe you have a great Notes app. Guess what? Apple has a good Notes app, and it comes for free, and you can expect it to get better. So I don't expect someone to. I wouldn't invest in another Notes app.
I'm think Notion would argue differently though. Notion or Evernote, or I don't know, yeah.
Evernote, I wouldn't say is a great success, but wait, I think you're making a really good, interesting point, right? So, what is the thing that allowed Notion to be successful versus Notes? I think Notes was aimed at the individual note taker, where Notion was from day one. It kind of was an enterprise tool. It wasn't sure. Some ultra productive people use it for their research and setting up their, taking notes in their life. That's great, 100%. I don't think that's the main use case, and I don't think that's the main driver of growth there. I think it was basically the idea that notes for a SME and enterprise, that you need to have a single spot for them, etc.
Yeah, I'd say Notion was collaborative day one, so it was meant to work with people at the same time. I think all the others started off natively just notes for the individual, and then tried to add some other features on. So I think they made it like it's a combination of a notes and a wiki and a whatever. It's really hard to tell what it exactly is. It's a bit weird at first, but then when you realize what it's doing is we're sharing information.
So think about like the ecosystem of mobile, and think about like the ecosystem of operating systems. All right, so Microsoft, right? So Microsoft needs to own Office to make Windows successful. That they realized it very early on, and they immediately went after that world, and now they're defending their little turf by building, like, not allowing anyone to replace those key services. And a good example is what we've seen with Microsoft Teams, when it makes sense that Zoom and back then, before that, Skype, but Zoom and Google Meet became like something that drove people out of the Microsoft ecosystem. They immediately invested heavily in Microsoft Teams. I don't like the product, but like it was good enough to defend their ecosystem. So I expect that there's this core. Look at OpenAI, look at those giants, and there will be core products and services that will be close enough that they will be, that they will build and they will defend. And if you think about it, if it's a what is the characteristic? If it's close enough to the model, it's a relatively shallow user interface, meaning it's not a video editing, right? That's like you have to spend infinite amount of time and money on the interface of how does it work. And it turns out that something like the NotebookLM that you mentioned, that Google pushed, that's something that seems to something they're able to build in a few weeks, small group of people. That's not because they are amazing engineers. I'm sorry, they probably are amazing engineers, but that's because the most of the lift here in doing that is in the model. It's not in the UI. All right. So if you've got a product that's most of the lift is in the model, it's not in the UI. And it's a general purposey, and it makes sense for the model provider to build it, then it's not a great startup idea, because guess what? You're high likely, it's the kill zone. You're in the kill zone. It could be, there's a high risk. You may be able to do it, you may be able to put it, but you're in the kill zone. So I think about along those lines. And our colleagues are using the phrase vertical AI. That's not a bad phrase. We use the AI edge to say we're looking for businesses that have an AI edge. So if you think of vertical AI, it's a phrase that suggests that, take a vertical and go deep into it, then you're more likely to stay away from the kill zone. So general purpose podcasting, turns out it was, an easy to build, relatively close to the, shallow UI. Most of it is in the AI, in the interface. It's like a little bit like Apple Podcasts. So, I'm not surprised. And then, legal tech with super deep expertise in a particular part of legal domain, unlikely to be something that OpenAI wants to build.
Yeah, fair enough. I think, but I think we're talking about the same thing even earlier. Like it's if you have to do something that's significantly better to make you want to change from the default. So if it's part of your and actually this is exactly what I think is what your point you made about Apple having something that's pretty good for free is the same as Microsoft, and it's a good sort of discussion around. Microsoft is the same. They have okay products. They've kind of bastardized something that was good and given you something that's okay. So I would go Teams is okay, but they basically just.
It's not. You're not going to switch out if you're an enterprise. You're not going to switch out of Microsoft because they don't have video.
Well, and that's their advantage. That's their massive advantage of dumping software or bundling. As that bundling is something that gives them a massive advantage. I think, and when I see that here, we don't do a lot here in Canberra necessarily. A lot of it is government. And when I sort of talk to people about what is the enterprise adoption what I hear people say is, yeah, we're using AI, we're using Microsoft Copilot. And when you dig a bit deeper and you go, well, how are you actually using it? They're using it in a very restricted, very narrow, not even touching on things to do anything useful. And I think it's quite interesting to see that that's there because it's approved, because it's there, it's being used in the enterprise. There was an interesting article that I was reading by one of my someone that I really like, Ethan Mollick, who's written a couple of really great books on AI and the implications. And so he wrote an article about AI in organizations and talked about, where are we at? What are some tactics in that? And the discrepancy in what's happening right now between individual adoption and what's happening in companies, and the fact that many individuals are using this, but across organizations they're not doing that. And it's also the fact that there's a lack of leadership, there's a lack of experimentation in this. And I talk a lot about this in some of the MBA. I sort of do some guest lecturing around this with a particular university. And so for me, I find it interesting to see people on that corporate side want to adopt. The intention is to adopt, but the actual what's happening and people using it is still way off. And he talks a little bit about this secret cyborgs in organizations. So individuals within an organization, I hear that all the time about how people we're not allowed to use it, but they're using it on their own. And the fact that people are doing that and doing it secretly is what's really happening. And so I think it's really around how people can get this across the organizations, how people can start to really have R&D, talk about just how much more productive people can be using a lot of this. But I think there's a gap between people being scared and leadership, and really around policies around using this and experimentation. That's one of the big things for me. So so I think it's really, I think for us in the next few years, I feel like there's this big step change that's going to have to happen from a leadership point of view for many of the products that we're looking at investing in being widespread throughout those larger corporates. Anyway, what's your thoughts on that? I'd love you to read the book as well, or the article.
I think that the tracking the enterprise adopt, like there's a lot of money, especially in VC circles, basically betting on essentially the adoption rate of these technologies by enterprises. So it works in our favor when it goes up, the adoption rate, meaning more enterprises adopt more AI tools faster, and it goes against us if if there's just a bunch of laggers and it's only get adopted by consumers as opposed to enterprises. I think it's going to be different than any other technology wave, and it's going to be a lot of companies are basically waiting to see if their favorite providers, name it, Microsoft, IBM, whatever it is, gonna come up with the AI tools that they need. In the meanwhile, their user base, their actual employees are using those technologies on a daily basis. That tension is exactly the spark of innovation. This kind of tension that led to the adoption of course, we got, not only Slack, Zoom, but also, of course, famously Atlassian, which is kind of bottom-up adoption, and then corporate goes, okay, fine, we'll adopt it. And I think that's the channel to the market in the early stages of a technology shift. So.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna slightly disagree with you as well. That I think this phase of technology is different, and once again, we're constantly learning, and I know
this time is different. It's the most dangerous 4 words in investment.
What's that?
This time is different is the most dangerous words in investment, and they say that the most dangerous 13 words in investment is to say this time is different is the most dangerous words in investment.
I said I slightly disagree with you, so it's kind of different, but not. But I mean, look, what is it? Your mate Yuval Harari, Nexus. I don't know if you read the book, his new book. I was watching something, him talking about that just the other day, and in terms of the view that this technology, though, is we can't distinguish between humans and what has been generated by a machine. And he talked a lot about the negative implications of that, in the sense that
Yeah.
we're going to have things that are generated, and there's going to be AI, whether we call them bots or agents, or out there generating, whether it be content or something. I don't think we've ever had that where you could. I actually can't tell now in a lot of ways if something was written by someone or augmented by someone. It's very, very difficult to tell, and I think even within AI detection tools, will struggle with that when it's augmented with your own, with your own sort of writing or your own style of whatever you're generating. But I guess that's why I'm sort of saying is I think this is. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to slightly disagree. I'm not going to say this time it's different. But I think this adoption is very. You have to cannibalize or change what you do quite drastically, and there are many jobs that are going to be very different. And if you're not prepared to change your job drastically on how you do it, you're not going to be able to compete. And we're going to have a lot of organizations that I'm going to say are obese with people who are trying to protect their jobs because they view, and I'm not saying that they should lose jobs, but we need to adapt and change the way we do things. So I'm not trying to be that AI is all great, but I do think we should be using it to help help each other do more and create more positive things. And I'm being very careful by what I'm saying as well, that I do think this technology can be used to be more productive in a good way, and people need to use it in a constructive, safe way. But it does mean many of the jobs that we have now will need to change. That's probably my biggest point on this. Yeah.
We'll live and see.
Yeah. All right. That sounds like a good time to end our chat today. Great talking to you again, Dror. Another This Week in AI. Dror wanted to talk about school holidays. I wanted to talk about AI, but we combined two together. So I'll catch up with you next week. Good to be back.